Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Deidre. Today, I am conversing with Juanita, a world traveler who, after releasing herself from an irreconcilable marriage, recommitted herself to what she loves, traveling solo. Here's a fact. According to Solo Traveler World, nearly 60% of solo travelers are women. And according to Booking.com, 65% of solo travelers reported feeling more confident after traveling alone. Welcome, Juanita.
Thank you for having me, Deidre.
All right. Can you share a bit about your background and how you first fell in love with solo traveling?
Sure. So I've been traveling honestly as far back as I can remember. I was telling someone not too long ago, I remember when you flew and they gave you the little lunch boxes and you got your wings, and they were, it was a full meal for every flight.
Yes.
So that's how long I've been traveling. My aunt moved away when I was young, an aunt that I was extremely close to. And so I went to visit her pretty much every long holiday and every summer. And then in high school, I moved away, and so I would fly back and forth by myself often. And so that's as far back as I've been traveling. But then I had children, got married, and every year, even with my children, we went on at least 1 to 2 trips. And until my children was like, do we have to still go? Now they begging to go. Now they're begging to go. And so that was the start of my travel. But I'll tell you how I got into solo traveling.
Okay.
So there's no right or wrong, and I want to preface this conversation by saying that there's no right or wrong. It's preference. And so so once my children were older, I had a long list of like places that I wanted to go to. And even to this day, there was still for a long time, like, I'm not going to go to this place until whatever I get married, or I'm not going to. So I kept putting it off. Like in my 20s, you had those college trips where a bunch of college friends got together, piled into a room, and no tea, no shade. That's never been a good time for me. So I went because that's what everyone was doing until I finally said, and that's what we can afford. So I know why we were doing it. I'm not clueless as to why we were doing it, but it was not a good time for me. It was cool, maybe first day to meet your friends, but at that point I had a whole child. So I was probably at a different level already. And so I eventually stopped going on those trips because it was just not a good time for me. And so as I got older and started having, and my kids were older, and now I have the funds, the means, and the time, and I started thinking about places I wanted to go, I put together a group trip. And again, no right or no wrong. But there, I always, for me, feel like there's a time and place for everything. And so I am not sit on the beach all day, get in a pool and stay at the pool all day. We have a beach right here in Chicago. If I just want to go sit at the beach, and people could say, well, you can do everything somewhere else. What you can't do is experience the culture somewhere else in your own city. Yep, there's little pockets, maybe little Havana, Chinatown, K-Town. It is not the same as experiencing that culture in the culture. So my idea of a good trip was, okay, I'm gonna do the pool with you for a minute, I'll do the beach. And so on that group trip, I found myself solo because they laid in the beach all day, in the pool all day rather, and went to the beach. And I was like, okay, we got like one more day here. I need to go do the things that I enjoy doing.
Right.
And I'm about the experience. So I like good food. I don't drink enough to need a red cup. So I drink socially. So I enjoy a good glass of wine, and I probably didn't even love it as much as I love it now then. But if I'm going to drink, I want the experience at a nice restaurant. So just drinking to drink at a pool was just not a good time for me. And so after that trip, I said I had to have a come to Jesus moment with myself and said, because I know that when you're not having a good time, you probably could be the miserable one, right? For
Yes.
everyone else who this is what their idea of good time is. And so I said to myself, if I can go, out of state by myself, go to theaters by myself, go do all the things I enjoy, museums, Broadway shows. Um, and if I can do and go sit at restaurants and do that in state by myself, I will be taking my first international trip. And so I ended up picking Atlanta because I'm in commercial real estate. I have been for over 20 years. And so Atlanta was my portfolio. So I was comfortable with Atlanta. So I chose somewhere I was comfortable with first, but I didn't go for business. I went specifically for personal travel. And I booked Broadway shows. I went to Cirque du Soleil. I wish I remember. It's been many years now, but I wish I remember what show I went to see. But it was a lovely theater. I went to afternoon tea, one of the things I still do on pretty much every trip. I had wine. I walked because my sister will tell you as far back as she can remember. She would say, "Where are we going?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We just walking."
Mhm.
Because to me, even though I have an itinerary, it's a loose itinerary. You don't know what you don't know. So if you just go by what everyone else tells you to do, you will limit yourself to just, those destinations. And so I would just walk. And after that trip, I think I was still in Atlanta and I booked London and Paris.
Wow.
And my solo travel took off from there.
All right. So, Juanita, and I'll ask this question because I'm sure everyone is going to be impressed. And I didn't have it in my list of questions, but I am going to ask you how many countries that you visited, if you have a count, because I know it's a lot.
I do. I do
Okay.
keep up with account, and probably more so because then after you lose sight of, I don't really repeat countries now. There are a few countries I've repeated. So I kind of keep up with, okay, where else do I want to go?
Right.
And so I was hoping on this call I would be saying 57 countries because I'm supposed to be taking this call from Curacao, but I
Right.
ended up getting sick. So it's 54 countries because
Wow.
I was going to do the ABC Islands, Curacao, Bonaire, and Aruba. So that would have added three more to my list. And that's how I've traveled for the most part. If I spend more than 6 hours on a flight, I am more than likely going to more than one country.
Right.
So yes, 54 countries.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you, Juanita, how did your last marriage impact your ability to travel and pursue your passion?
So I'll say this. I almost can't talk about that marriage without briefly mentioning my first marriage. I was married for over 20 years to my children's father. We're still best friends. And we were very compatible. We grew up together, right? I knew him since I was 15. So we were compatible in a lot of ways, especially in terms of travel. Now we eventually evolved and sort of outgrew each other, but not. But and I always explain it that we left before anything happened bad. Right, we separated and got a divorce before it was bad because we were basically passing in the halls. So we are great friends. We just were no longer compatible in a marriage,
Right.
and so and I watched that, but I'll just briefly touch on that because other people are like, well, if y'all such good friends, how can y'all not stay together? I watched my grandparents pass through the halls. And I said, and I love my grandparents to death, but they stayed together for the kids. And so I waited till my kids was older and we were happy. Like we had a good time. It was a good marriage, but we outgrew each other. We were literally passing through the halls. And I never wanted to be that. I watched that with my grandparents. And so people would always say, why don't you just stay with what you know? I was too young to just stay with what I know. But going back to your question, we were very compatible. So we traveled very well together. So my first experience of not having a good travel experience was sort of that group trip, right?
Mhm.
And so then here my solo travel career, I was divorced for about 6 or 7 years. I lose count now before the second marriage, right? And so now I've traveled quite a bit by myself, right? And so in your 20s, you make certain decisions that you no longer make in your 40s, right? That's not to say you don't compromise, but it's some things you come to the table and you say, this is who I am.
Mhm.
Okay. And so in that marriage, in the second marriage, that person had actually witnessed and watched me for like 1 to 2 years before I actually knew them. So they knew that. So my kids was sort of out of my hair, and so I had done the home cooking meals and all of that and hosting a house. Right, I wasn't that person anymore. I had lived that life, and I had elected to no longer be that housewife kind of woman, right? And we're adults, right? You've been feeding yourself. I've been feeding myself. I've been traveling the world. You watched me travel the world. You watched me. I had the kind of friends who would call me on a Tuesday and say, "You want to go to Paris on Friday?" Say less.
Yeah.
Like the flight booked. If a flight deal, because we were in a time where flight deals just dropped. I would pull over on the side of the road on my way to work, book a flight deal, and book everything else later. You just had to catch the deal. So that's the life I was living. My friends would call and say, "Hey, you want to take a boat this morning? All right, be downtown in 20 minutes." Say less. I'm in the car and I go, right? And so when at 40 something, I went into it saying, that's who you met.
Yes.
That's who I plan to continue to be. Obviously, incorporating you as I'm doing dating. And you know me, but everyone else does not. I'm not a big go out person.
Right.
My going out is brunch. We might have a theme party, if you will. I remember we did like a karaoke for someone's birthday. I attended that, but I'm not like I'm out kicking it a couple of times a week, even a month. Club is not my idea of a good time. So my friends calling and saying, and I'm very available. Obviously, if something had come up, then I wouldn't make those types of plans, right? So going into it, I set the tone for this is who I am, this is who you met. And he was all for it. Oh, that's what he loved about me. It's always, they love that about you when they meet you, right?
Yes.
This is what I like. And I would like to travel with you. And I'll never forget, and I won't say who said it because it would be too close to the story, but someone said to me once we got married, well, actually, we weren't even married yet, we were engaged, and someone said, "So now that you're engaged, you have someone you can travel with." And I was like, hold on. I've been a solo traveler by choice. I've always had people to travel with. So, me being engaged, as a matter of fact, I don't want my partner going on every trip with me. I will still travel by myself sometime. And so, our very first trip, it was okay. I won't say that was the nightmare trip, but every trip after that was. And so we were not compatible travelers at all. And it's a lot of little things that made us incompatible as travelers. And again, it's no right or wrong. It's just, I didn't sign up for that. And this is why I travel by myself. And so in the beginning, I compromised to adapt to someone not traveling as much as I do, but I travel for peace, right? And so once you realize something's not working out in terms of your compatibility on something, don't force that. We don't have to do everything together. We can find something else to do. But so whenever I traveled by myself after that, he was going to always have a problem with something. I was going to have to argue with him while I was on that trip. And so that was the impact. I still traveled solo, and then COVID happened. So COVID was his best friend. He loved COVID because I was sitting under his thumb. And so, I'm an adult, right? So I realized things happen. You have to adjust your sails. And so for like the first 3 or 4 months, I was cool. Like, this is the life we're living right now. But by about 6 months, I booked a flight. I booked a flight. And I said earlier on in this conversation that I am not a beach person, but I can make the best of everything. And so that was the perfect time for me to go to countries where that's all there is. So French Polynesia, here I come. So I booked a Bora Bora. Like, I booked a lot of what you mostly do is sit on the beach, sit on the water. I booked a lot of those trips during COVID. And it was perfect because you weren't supposed to be around people anyway, right? So it was a perfect time to go, not only to be on the beach, but to sit in the peace that I needed at that point in time. And so that was mostly the impact. I continued to travel because that part I was not willing to change. I'll tell you just really quick before we switch gears. When we first met, probably our second date. Now, mind you, he's watched me for about 2 years.
Mhm.
He's commented on. As a matter of fact, the first time he asked me out, I was on my way to Thailand. Right, I was en route into Thailand. So again, I'm not new to him, right?
Right.
And so, like second date, he asked me a question. Now, mind you, I've owned houses, I've built a house. I I chose to downsize because for me, it wasn't about things anymore. It was about experiences.
Right.
And so I could very well afford to be in the big house again. It was not my preference. It was not, I was no longer interested in that. I wasn't even interested in decorating. Like, I still like a nice lifestyle, but I was real bare bones at that point. All I wanted to do was be in the air, and go and experience another culture. And so, second date, he asked me, so if it came down to paying a real estate tax bill, like say you did own a house again, and should have been my first red flag, but it was like, this is one of those control things or where men think women like don't have their priorities in order. And so he's saying, if it came down to paying a tax bill or booking a trip, what would you do? And up to that point, we had talked quite a bit about how I budget
Right.
for trips, right? That was
Mhm.
a main part of my budget. I lived well below my means, well below my means. And so I said, I'd sell the house. I'd sell the house. The real estate taxes would get paid and I'd still travel, but I'd sell the house. Because if it means I have to compromise something that's important to me, I would get rid of it. Because that's what I've done up to this point. And so that was that was really his way, which later proved to be true of I'm going to change your mindset about, because the big house was still very much important to him. He had this idea of a lifestyle that he wanted to live. And so he was trying to impress that upon me. And I was very much like, I've done that. I've been there, done that. That's
Mhm.
not a priority for me. I'm not saying it shouldn't be for you, but it's not for me. And I'm not even interested in adapting to that. And
Mhm.
so if that's what you need, you should look for the partner that's also what they need.
Right.
So that again was the start of what proved to be the end of our issues travel related. A lot of people don't know this because people always are like, oh, people only put the positive things on social media. I've primarily talked about two things on social media: my weight loss years ago and travel, and for two reasons. Because I've always wanted to show people that it can be done.
Mhm.
Right? A lot of people think things are not touchable or not reachable. Is probably the word I want to look for. So when I lost 75 pounds I was an athlete in high school and then I had a child young. And then when I was a size 00, stepping on stage, and a lot of people always thought, oh, you have to go get um, a tummy tuck, or people saw me in the gym.
Mhm.
You want to know when I went and had extra skin removed, I've never had a tummy tuck, is after I was a size 00. And I was on stage and skin was still showing. And so I've only mostly talked about weight loss and then travel because as Black Americans, Americans, period, we don't travel the world like other countries do.
Right.
And so I wanted to show again, it's attainable. Like I'm going to Japan for $300. Like here, it's not me bragging. Let me show you how you can also do it, right?
Right.
And so by him asking me the questions about how I'm doing it or why I'm doing it, it was never something I was really going to discuss on social media when it was negative. And so I never really told people, we went to Colombia. I left him in Colombia. I've never left a trip. I've never left a trip early. I flew back home. I changed my flight. I flew back home early because travel with him was so miserable. And I love to travel. I didn't love it enough to be miserable. And so a lot of people didn't know he was spending New Year's Eve in Colombia by himself. I was at home cooking for my kids.
Well, I can say this, knowing you, Juanita, you're very serious about your travel. It's like the air that we breathe. So, what was the turning point? Knowing what you've already talked about thus far, what was the turning point that made you decide to leave the marriage and continue more of your solo traveling?
So I'll say this, travel was not the reason that I left. However, it was just one of the additional red flags, right? That incompatibility that I just talked about, like even on the trips, a lot of that carried into the house. And I'll say, you have to go a little bit backwards. And I take full responsibility for my role in it, right? I'll never forget, it was a Mother's Day. And my first Mother's Day after meeting him, and I met him like September. So, however many months that is afterwards. And it was like that weekend. And he went into a full rage on his daughter about someone she was dating. And a lot of what he was describing about the person, it was very shallow, but a lot of it, I was like, she should just love who she loved, right? And she's a very bright girl, um, doing very well for herself. But he had, parents have this idea of what their kid, who their kid should be with, and not that the young man was perfect, but neither was he, right? He, like me, the two things we had in common. So we had our first child young, and we were both married for over 25 years previously. And so everything that he was describing about this young man, and I always tell people, remember, young people grow up to be old, right? So the way you talk to them, the way you treat them, remember, they don't forget. You have to be careful what you say to them because they grow up,
Right.
and they remember that. And so what he was describing was, I'm sure, the way somebody described him at that age. And he was describing my older son with indirectly. And I remember being, number one, a little bit shocked at the amount of rage that he had about it and how he was talking to her. And I addressed it later, like, and he didn't talk to his daughter for a little while after that. They're close now, but and
Right.
I'm sure even then, but you know how it is. He didn't talk to her for a while after that because it was really more about control, right? So those red flags, again, he did a lot of explaining away who he was because of how he was raised and apologizing for it. And part of me, it was kind of twofold. I was always accused of being too hard on people, accused of being mean. I am not mean. I am direct though, and I prefer that people are direct with me. So we real clear. We real clear. Because even if you don't like me, I'm clear about it. I'm
Right.
okay with it, but I'm clear about it. There's no misunderstanding. We don't even have to shoot the shit. I'm sorry for
Mhm.
cursing, but
No, it's fine.
we is if we clear with how each other feel, and and what I learned with age, and not that I've ever been nasty about it. I probably mostly would just shut up when my face would say it. But what I learned with age is you can still do that. You just have to do it with tact.
Right.
And so with him, I was like, okay, because a lot of people were shocked when I was dating him. People had different reasons why they were shocked that I was dating him, but he wasn't the normal guy that I had dated. And I was like, he's a nice guy, because that's all you had to be. I didn't need anything from him. I had been taking care of myself, and so he was taking care of himself. We at that age should have been able to just come together and live happily ever after, because I didn't need anything from him but for him to be a decent person. And so, of course, he explained away that behavior that I observed, even some things that he said early on about his mom and how she can handle business. And I was like, you do know that's your mom, right? She's very much, it was very much a difference between what I saw early on and ignored was gender roles, right? And so he like called his father on his mother one time because she loaned his sibling money. And I was livid. I was like, your mother's grown. Your mother knows exactly what she's doing and she can do what she wants. And so he would explain away like, no, no, you don't really know. I don't need to know. What I do know is I struggle a little bit. I think I'm better now, but I really used to struggle with weak women. And so I used to be like, don't demean her. She's stronger than what he gave her credit for. But those little signs, of course, never carry over to me dating. It didn't translate until he moved in, right? The way in which we were supposed to be buying a house ended up me buying a house and then fighting with him to get money back, right? To pay for the house. And so all those little character flaws started to come into the relationship once he thought I was trapped, right? Okay, well, we got this whole house. And little did he know it was just real estate as far as I was concerned. But that's when all that I had seen his behaviors to other people started to come to me. And then COVID happened. And so after many, many apologies and calling people, asking them to talk to me, and how he's in therapy. Therapy bought him a long time. Therapy bought him a lot of time. And me, again, trying not to be usually I will cut things off immediately and it will be as if we never met.
Right.
But I was trying not to be that person. And then I found myself in a situation where it was like, okay, my family was even saying, how are you going to get out of this? Because you do have real estate in common now, because he eventually paid me his half of me buying the house. And so we weren't married. We were just engaged. COVID postponed the wedding. And so it was a lot of, I'm in therapy, I'm gonna do better. And you hear people talk about that 30-day act. Oh, it's real. It's real. And the older me, you get 30 seconds. You get 30 seconds. Even then, the 20-year-old with me, you had 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to return after that back to who I really am. You don't get any opportunities because once you show who you are, I believe you.
Yeah.
And you don't have to keep showing me. And so after plenty of that, and I'll tell you really what it really was. Honestly, if COVID never happened, a wedding would have never happened.
Mm.
Because the minute COVID started to let up and we were able to go back outside, and let me tell you what my go back outside was. My friends started doing brunch just because restaurants had opened. And a lot of them lived downtown where they didn't have balconies. So it was a good opportunity to like get outside. So we were doing brunch either every other Sunday, and I was literally coming right back because it still wasn't a lot open.
Right.
And he would fight with me every time. He'd come up with something. And then when the world fully opened back up, and by this time we had gotten married, and I had already told him before the wedding, you, first of all, I haven't even known you long enough for us to be this incompatible. You get zero more. So a lot of people go into marriage like, oh, it's through thick, through thin, till death do you part. He had done all of that before the marriage. So I was like, okay, that therapy and all the you a better person and you understand what it takes. You get zero after the wedding. Zero. Because you've done it all. You've shown your ass, for lack of better words. Um, and so you get zero. So for other people, it looked like, oh, she cut the ties immediately. No, he had already acted a whole fool. And so I'll never forget my wine group. We had our first in-person event. And again, right after the world opened back up. And when I say he was at work and was acting a whole fool because I was going to a wine event, literally a restaurant downtown. Um, Again, not even if I was though, but that's just not who I am. But I could not stand it, could not stand it. And I said to myself, I can't live like this. First of all, I was used to living in a peaceful household. My house was quiet. Everyone knew that about my house. People still to this day come to my house currently and was like, you can hear a pin drop because I rarely even had a TV on.
Right.
I went from that to 500,000 decibels. So I went from quiet to hell quickly. And so the once I was like, okay, we're not doing this. And he really thought because we had this big elaborate wedding, I didn't care anything about that. You had zero, and even to this day, he would say, "Well, I thought because we had got married, you would work through it." No, you had zero more opportunities, zero. And then I tell him all the time because one thing he couldn't stand about me, and this is still very much, I told you early on in this conversation that my ex and I are best friends. We really good friends. But anybody I've ever dated, that's my story.
Mhm.
That is my story because I don't believe you got to burn the house down. I don't believe you have to burn the house down on your way out. Decide you're not compatible and split, go separate ways, right? It might be rocky in the beginning because one person is not happy with that decision, but it's how you go out and how you came in that make all the difference, right? And
Mhm.
so he went out in flames. He went, and I told him, I was like, you know how much you hate it that I still had good. Now there's a line now. There's a line on all those relationships that we cool, but I'm never crossing the street again, right? Now, and
Right.
all of them know I'm never crossing the street again, but we good to go. Your car broke down, my car broke down. I know you coming to take care of me. But I told him, you know how much you hated that I wasn't friends with them, you're going to get you. I'm not gonna be friends with you. I'm gonna give you exactly what you wanted from them. They didn't have to burn the house. They didn't burn the house down on the way out.
Right.
So I walked away after he was in flames.
Okay. So let me ask you, how has traveling solo helped you heal and rediscover yourself now that you are divorced?
I struggle with the word heal because I didn't feel like I was wounded or sick. When I think about that, um, I'll tell you, even though I'm the first, let me go back a little bit. Uh,
Okay.
my first marriage. When I tell you I loved everything about that man, I loved his breath. Like I loved him. So the decision to divorce him, I sat in my car and cried because I made the decision.
Mm.
But it was a hard decision to say this no longer serves either of us, right?
Right.
And so I had to heal from that because it was like to when I was like, I just don't love him like that anymore, right?
Mhm.
That was I had to heal from. So when people think heal, they think, oh, you're injured or somebody did you wrong. No, I had to heal from the idea that let's accept the reality. We love each other, we're not in love with each other, right? So moving on to the second one, I knew, and I hate to say this now, like people are like, girl, when you came out of your wedding. I knew early on that I was in trouble, right? And
Mm.
I kept trying to say, I really kept trying to show him that not everybody in the world got it out for you. Not everybody's disloyal. The more you think you look, let me just say this example. If I went to Walmart, if I said to him, I'm going to Walmart, and Walmart was across the street from Target, and I decided while I was at Walmart or even at the parking lot, I'm gonna go to Target instead. And maybe I'll go to Best Buy or whatever. And he called and he would say, where you at? And I say, I'm in Target. I thought you was going to Walmart. And so that level of control, yes, ma'am, that level of control was something that the more you do that to me, I will never answer my phone because now you're gonna be mad because now you think I'm on something for real, but no, you're not. I'm not your child because I was seeing it to his kids, and so when I say heal, I'll tell you, I didn't have to heal from that because I was immediately plotting, and I hate to use the word plotting because it was a strategy, that I suggest for all women. Always have yourself in a position to be able to walk away from anything,
Mhm.
even if it's yours. And so I knew that I was leaving. I strategized on how I left. And so I was definitely financially equipped to leave, but it was a matter of how am I going to get rid of this real estate? How am I severing everything? And then he got injured. And I'm always going to do the right thing because that's the only way that I've been successful in life is by doing the right thing by other people. And so I had already told him before he failed that I was filing for divorce. But then when he failed, then I felt sorry for him because, he was going through a lot. And so at one point I was like, okay, maybe this gonna be a lesson. No, ma'am. When you bite off the hand that feeds you, you get what you get. And so at that point, if somebody ever described me as mean, that might have been the moment to describe me as mean. Because I don't care at the point that you kept biting off the hand that was feeding you. I don't care if you had to scoot, crawl, or roll to get a cup of water. I wasn't giving it to you because you didn't even know how to accept help when it was being offered to you freely while I'm trying to work full-time job, trying to help you run an event. So what I had to heal from was living in a house of hell and immediately trying to reset myself back up into a lifestyle that I was used to. And so the minute once I make my mind up about something, it's go. Like you could do cartwheels in front of me. At that point, I'm going.
Mhm.
And so what I really had to heal from was other people around me um, that I walked away from in addition to him.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you, since that time, what are some of the most memorable experiences you've had on your travels?
Ooh, I have many. I was just thinking about this the other day. Um, I really love animals.
Oh,
Not to necessarily be in my house, but
okay.
going to safari in Kenya and Tanzania was probably one of the best trips I've taken. Um, but it's funny, there's been this thing on TikTok, and I was actually going to make a TikTok about this not too long ago. There's been this thing, if you've seen it, would you run from the bear or the man? Right? I am glamping in Tanzania, and you hear the lions, right? You've seen them. Now you
Hmm.
hear them, right? They're literally right outside your camp, but I don't want to call them poachers because they're hired at that point. They used to be poachers. They're hired to protect you from the animals, but they literally you can't go outside at night. And I wasn't afraid of the animals, but the night before I was leaving, when I came back, I noticed that the thing that I had, the only source you had to call the front desk for help, my bullhorn was broke. A lot of things that was safety, supposedly safety for me, was somehow impaired. I became afraid of the man and not the bear. But it wouldn't stop me from glamping because people, I've been in some funny situations. But the safari, I recently went to Mauritius, and I came as close to another safari as I've gotten since Africa. And then the giraffes, like just my love. A lot of people are like, oh, they doing it for the Instagram. No, I love the animals. They're such an amazing they're amazing creatures and how human they are. And it's interesting if you've ever been on a safari, how they are able to be out there amongst the animals because they've learned how the animals function. And so you don't need a gun. They carry on for your safety in case you act up. But I'll never forget an elephant got right next to and he was a teenage boy
Mm.
elephant, and he was trying to like threaten us, like get away from our camp. And me, I was looking at the driver like, why are we not driving? And he was like, no, just sit still, because he on my side. And so when I saw, he just looked so innocent, though he just so fake threatening. And other people be like, girl, that don't sound like a good story. When I tell you I would do it all over again, I would do it all over again. And things worked out exactly like he said. He was like, just sit still. And he was like, he will back off if we just don't move. And eventually he was like, if we start pulling off, he'll
Mhm.
chase. But if we eventually just start backing off, he sees us as another big elephant. He sees us as another big animal. If we back off, he feels like he won. Girl,
Mm.
that don't sound like every man. But yeah, the safari was probably one of my favorites. That I was like, I need to go. I want to go during the Great Migration. I went
Mhm.
after last time, which I still got to see everything except the rhino. But it's all an experience. A lot of people are afraid of the seaplanes, and I'm just like, just do it. Like
Yeah.
you only live once.
Hmm. All right. So I know you kind of alluded a little bit about safety concerns. How do you manage safety and security while traveling alone?
So I've never actually lived in Chicago, but when people say where you from, I say Chicago.
Mm.
But I've always lived in the suburbs, right? And so what I always tell people is I take the same precautions in another country that I take here. When I hear about and think about people walking in the middle of the night home from a bus stop or sitting on a bus stop here, and I know I'm probably talking from a privileged place because people do what they have to do, but
Right.
when you are raised in a certain environment, you're not afraid of that environment, right? So that would be your safety, right? You would sort of live the same way you live from where you are from, but I'm from the suburbs. I learned how to take a bus until I got married, and my first husband was like, "Okay, you got to take this bus to get downtown." So I'm not going to be the girl that's walking in the middle of the night in Lincoln Park, no
Right.
matter how safe people tell me it is. I won't be in Johannesburg walking at night. Now, with time, in addition to that, so I say don't do anything you wouldn't do at home, right? Um, which is why even I check every window when I first go into a hotel. I lock every window when I landed. Sorry, in French, Seychelles. When I got to Seychelles, my hotel, even though my unit was elevated, all my windows was unlocked, immediately locked. But anyway, I was about to say, in addition to telling people don't do what you wouldn't do at home, there are certain countries for a long time early in my travel career, I wouldn't do Africa. I wouldn't do Africa by myself because it was such an unknown. And I was in Morocco, and Morocco is it's Africa, but it's not quite Johannesburg, right?
Mhm.
And so when I was in Morocco, I scheduled Morocco after watching someone else do it. And so I literally reached out to the owner of the Riad, and she booked everything for me, hired me an escort, and she hired me a driver.
Mhm.
She loved her to death. She curated that trip for me. But while I was there, I met a couple from Florida. And they had just left Egypt, and there was bombing in Egypt. But girl, the way they described Egypt, they was like, you have to go. Like you have to go next. And so I was like, okay, Juanita, girl, they shooting people up. Because at the time they had just had a shooting in Chicago. Not in Chicago, in the United States. It was like a mass shooting. And so I said, okay, if it's your time, it's your time, right?
Mhm.
But do it smart, right? So a friend of mine, which you happen to know,
Mhm.
she is one of my few friends at the time who also had adult children and could just at the drop of a dime book a trip. So I said, hey, you want to go to Egypt? And girl, they was things happen everywhere. It
Yes.
was uneventful. And from then on, I just started looking at how other people have done it, right? I'm not going to not do it. I'm going to look at what worked and what didn't work.
Mhm.
And so I stopped, even like another friend of mine had just gone to Johannesburg. I intentionally did not book an Uber when I went because to South Africa because they got robbed. And I was like, that was a setup. So certain things I learned from watching other people, and putting certain safety precautions. So certain places I will have the hotel book a car for me, depending on the country. But if it's a country that's pretty Uber safe, like Europe, I'll just jump in a Uber when I get there. But for the most part, I'm in a travel group where anything you pretty much want to search about, there's over 15,000 members now. Someone has done it. So I was heavy on research, and usually will hire a driver. that's local who this is what they do. So they're not
Mhm.
going to jeopardize. Even in Panama, we had a situation, but the local operator had fortunately been used to like the gangs doing certain things. So he was intentionally like avoiding taking us that way. So I just say you have to do some research. You can't just land and curate your trip accordingly.
Ooh, some good advice. Good advice. Now, what advice would you give to others who might be in a similar situation as yourself, coming out of a divorce and considering a big life change? What advice would you give them?
Take it slow. Like, although we say tomorrow is not promised, don't keep putting it off, but you don't have to do it all at once, right? So I remember when I first got out, right? So I had to put some things on hold, hence the test that I'm studying for after this interview. But I had to, I am good at adjusting my sales, right? And so I had to now look for a new place. And subsequent to that, I bought a new property, but that took time. And I just remember thinking it's painful now to like have to go through these couple of weeks, but this too shall pass. But I have to keep moving. And so I gradually started getting back to who I knew and what I knew, right? So, all right, set up your home because you have to live, you need somewhere that's peaceful. And I remember like taking a breath saying, "Whew, all that's finally behind me." And then you move into what it is you really want to do. A lot of people just live, right? They just go to work,
Mhm.
they pay bills, and that's all they're doing.
Right.
Living doesn't have to cost money. Like for me, my peace uh, was running. My peace was going for a walk. My peace is reading a book by myself. That's my peace. That don't cost. That don't cost me any money. The ground's free. And so when I first started, now again, you gotta remember the bear.
Right.
So I still was doing a lot of things precautiously, but
Mhm.
I started getting back to the things that I enjoy. But take your time to do it. Just know what they are, though. Write them down. Start ticking off that list. Don't sit still. Don't wallow in it. I'm very much and this is with everything. I'm very much I am going to stay busy. Now, it was funny because last year I got too busy. I was like, okay, I didn't mean to be this busy. But I am very much fill my time. I'm not going to sit around. I'm not going to wallow in any situation. What's next? What we
Right.
doing? Because what I've always hated is for people to complain about something and stay in it.
Mhm.
So I was back to the point I was making earlier about people saying, like, you don't talk about negative stuff. It's because I don't lay in it, right?
Right.
I don't talk about it because by the time you know about it, I'm out of it.
Mhm.
You know, I'm very much you don't even have to talk about it. You complaining about it. Now, if you're gonna stay in it, don't complain about it. Accept that that's your reality and deal with it. But I am very much let me establish a plan on how I'm walking away from this or getting out of this or changing this. And that's not just relationships, that's jobs.
Mhm.
There's nothing worse than hearing somebody complain about their job for 20 years, but 21st year, you walking right on in the same place.
Right. Right. Okay. So can you describe a particularly challenging moment during a solo travel and how you overcame it?
Got a few of those too. It's funny because you learn 54 trips or whether you're at 70 trips, every trip you learn something, right?
Yes.
I probably have two funny stories. That very first trip, right? And I was green as they come, right? So I knew going into it that even though we see London and Paris as Europe, the UK and Europe, there's British pounds and there's euros. I
Mhm.
knew that. I'm an accountant. I knew that in the back of my head. But I had gone to Paris first and I got euros up front. And I remember thinking, oh, I'll get pounds at some point. And I'm thinking, okay, Europe also has Uber. And so I leave Paris and I get to London and I go to get in a taxi and I'm like, it's cash. I have no British pounds. I'm like, can you take euros? He's like, no, ma'am. So I went like through three cabs where no one would do credit cards and no one would take euros. And so finally, I said, well, can you just take me to the ATM? And they was like, oh yeah, we all do that. Like we take people all the time. I'm passed up like 3 or 4. I'm in a panic at this point because I'm like, how am I gonna get to my hotel? And so probably all my stories are like Uber related. Because the thing that I love about Uber, not in this country,
Mhm.
but I have better experiences in other countries with your Uber is that I don't have to speak the language. I just put in where I want you to take me, and if you don't speak English, we don't have to talk, but you know
Right.
exactly where to take me, right? That's kind of how I started taking Uber.
Mhm.
And so, but I was in Canada. I was in Montreal. And a friend of mine who had lived there was born, I want to say she was born and raised there. She's originally from Haiti, but she told me, oh, you need to go to this shopping area. Girl, it's a nice shopping area. And now, mind you, she hadn't been there in like 10, 15 years living. And so I jump in an Uber and I go to the area. And as we approaching it, I'm like, this looked like Lower Wacker. And if you know Lower Wacker in Chicago, it is not a good thing. It's homeless people laying around. And so, and I could see, I could tell the Uber's reaction from where he picked me up from
Hmm.
when I said where he was taking me. And so as we got closer, I'm thinking, okay, he gonna go around the corner. Cause you know, sometimes downtown Chicago, for Green Green's right down the street. So
Right.
I'm like, oh, he gonna go around the corner, it's gonna change. It's not changing. And he was like, we at your destination. So I went ahead and got out. That was stupid though. I should have stayed in the car and been like, let me do a new trip, you take me back. I got out because I'm like, maybe I got the address wrong. I'm gonna walk around the corner. When crackheads, and I don't know, they might have been on something else. When they started coming up to me and my phone was acting crazy, I couldn't call. No Uber would come to the neighborhood.
Wow.
No Uber would come back. And so I said, okay, either the police taking me back
Hmm.
or I'm going and sitting in this. It was a Ted Horton. And I said, I am either going inside and they're going to have to call in somebody to take me back to my hotel. Because it wasn't even a hotel, I was staying in Airbnb. Otherwise, I'd have called a hotel to send me somebody. But
Right.
I was staying in a condo in Montreal. And I went inside. As soon as I walked in, a police officer walked in. And I was like, I need you to take me back. And as soon as he did, an Uber picked up. He said, I'll take you. And then Uber picked up. And girl, when I tell you after that shook me so bad that like after that, a friend of mine lives in Canada. I reached out to her and was like, so what we doing tonight? Because up to that point, again, I'm a solo traveler, so I didn't want her to feel like she was babysitting me for the trip, right? But after that, I was like, all right, I'm with you the rest of this trip.
Hmm.
Because I don't want to end up in the wrong side. I didn't even know Montreal had a bad side. But what I've learned with that is every city has a bad side.
Right.
There's poverty everywhere.
Hmm.
So, but yes, that was probably my scariest moment. And I think that was something happened in Prague. I think it was the power went out or something like that, and I couldn't get down the elevator, and they had a million stairs. I was just telling my sister about Venice, like that's where I learned to not overpack. But other than that, I haven't really had bad experiences. And people ask me that all the time, like, where would you not go? And I say, your experience is what you bring to it quite often.
Exactly.
Now, that's not always the case. I know that some people are just discriminated against just because, and I would probably say that's more men than women. I've not
Mhm.
had a bad experience for the most part. But I also know that what you bring to a trip also contributes to your experience on a trip.
Most definitely. So, how has your perspective on life and relationships changed since starting traveling solo so much again?
So I would have to say that I say the same thing today that I said in between the two marriages is that I'm trying to live my best life
Right.
with or without a partner.
Hmm.
It's something I've never had to though. I've never chased men. I've never followed up behind men. It's never been something I've had to do. So when I'm on a trip, it's, a lot of men think, oh, girls get together on girls' trips so that they can go men shopping. No, ma'am. That we so far not. If it happens, it happens, right? We just
Right.
have to be at the right place at the right time. But
Mhm.
that's so not my agenda. And I struggle with people when I travel with them when that's their agenda.
Right.
We typically are not compatible
Mhm.
because there's so many other things I want to see,
Yeah.
right? than sit in somebody's face. Now, if I get your information, we go for a nice dinner. You want to go to the museum? We could work out. But so I say the same thing that I said before. I'm not chasing it, but I'm not running from it, but I'm not chasing it.
Right.
I will continue, and I jokingly say, like, all right, when I went to Dubai, I thought I had a shake. But last year I was in Qatar. Now you got to be careful what you put in the universe. People I
Hmm.
say that all the time. I was in Qatar, and a man asked me to be his third wife. I ended up coming back to the United States and having to block that man. He still tries to call me from different numbers. He was determined that I was going to be his third wife. And Qatar is a beautiful country. And he
Hmm.
told me I could even come home when I wanted to. That alone was like, oh yeah, of course I can.
Right.
But I'm not interested in being anybody's third wife. And look, he wanted to take me home to meet the first wife, right?
Right.
So I was like, no, like that's so disrespectful. He's like, no, she's fine with it. And I thought to myself, because she has to be. She has to be fine with it.
Right.
Ma'am, no, sir. So really, I just, I'm living
Yes.
whatever that means for someone else. They don't have to like it.
Hmm.
I am doing what works for me. And I'm sure for someone else, we could blend, and I would expect them to continue to do what works for them. That doesn't mean when you get into a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to change. You had a life before you met that person.
Hmm.
When you're this age, it's different at 20s. You're growing up together. You make some compromises. But at this point, for the most part, you are who you are,
Yeah.
and like I said, yeah, are you gonna go out with your girl 7 days in a week when you have a husband or a boyfriend or whatever at home? Probably not. You shouldn't. If you do, you probably shouldn't be with the boyfriend. But
Right.
you don't give up those friends either.
Right.
So,
All right. So, Juanita, what destinations are on your travel bucket list now and why? I know the ABC, you Carousel,
yes, Bonaire and Aruba.
Bonaire, and
Yeah,
was
Aruba.
Aruba. Okay. But now,
Um,
are those on your bucket list now, or do you have others in mind?
so I turned 55 this year, and so right when COVID hit, well, let me back it up a little bit. When I went to Morocco, customs gave me a really hard time. And they were like, "Where are you from?" And I had heard about it, but it was the first time that anyone had given me a hard time.
Mm.
And I was like, "I'm from the US." It was like, "No, where are you really from?" Like, really, what they trying to give you a hard time about is that Americans don't know their culture, right? They don't know what tribe they're from. They don't know what part of Africa they're from.
Right.
And after that trip, I said I would never go back to Africa until I had an idea of where my people was from,
Mhm.
right? Now, no matter where I go, they think I'm from there, right? I was in Australia, and the guy was like, "You're Cuban. Like you are definitely Cuban." Went to Cuba, they was like, "You definitely Cuban." Went to Tanzania, they was like, "You look like all of us." Now I will say Tanzania was the closest. However, I ran my own ancestry DNA, and I am Cameroon. I'm more West Africa, Togo and Benin, a little bit of Nigerian, but a whole lot of Dutch.
Mm.
So, for the most part, if I had to attach myself to someone, it would be Cameroon. So, Cameroon was on my list. When I turned 50, I went to Ghana. I took a group to Ghana, and immediately I was like, I want to go to Cameroon. They seem like such beautiful people, too. Just the little bit of research that I've done, I've read a couple of books on their history. And so that is big on my list. And then COVID hit. Like I had actually planned the trip. I was taking a group, and then COVID hit. And for a while, I wanted to do Senegal. Senegal is not so much at the top of my list right now, just because everybody and their mom was beating Senegal down. When you start to beat a country down, or when becomes too popular, it becomes too Americanized.
Yeah.
And so I want to go for the culture. I'm not trying to go to Senegal and eat hamburgers. So I want to let that die down a little bit, and then I'll go to Senegal. Because a lot of times people are like, "You in countries nobody else have ever heard of," and I'm like, "That's intentional." Like I
Mhm.
want to go. Not that I have a thing with where the masses go, but it gets watered down.
Right.
I don't want the watered down experience. I want to really walk with the natives. Like I
Mhm.
want to get as close to the native experience as I can. And so Croatia has actually been on my list for a minute. Um, I want to do I a couple. Look, a couple. I don't want to put too much out because then people it'll get too crowded.
Okay. Okay. I
So,
got you. I got you.
but yeah, West Africa. Out of all my experience, I really enjoyed West Africa. But I love Senegal. And what I found is, for example, I was in Oman, and most of the natives from Oman came from Tanzania. Like when I was in Fiji, like how many of them came from Tanzania? When people think Fiji, they think beach, right? No, I did a
Right.
whole cultural tour in Fiji. And when I tell you I love those people, I
Ooh,
almost gave me a husband from there too. When I tell you, but I think it's funny because the sisters, I was the only black person in the group on the tour, and they weren't used to that. And so
yes.
the sisters, I tell you, they were, a lot of times people go in Jamaica's big on this. People be like, the women hate the women. When I tell you, those women really embraced me, but they definitely surrounded themselves around me. But I love the people in
Oh my gosh. Now, you like yourself, I normally don't want to go back to a destination twice. Fiji, I would go 100 times more.
me
The
too.
plane trip, when I landed, I can remember getting there. I just fell in love with the people. And I
Yes,
remember the first thing that a woman said to me was, "Welcome home."
yes,
And I
yes,
felt like I was home the entire time. And like you, my husband and I were the only blacks on an
mhm,
excursion, and they just made us feel, they made everyone feel welcome,
yes.
but they especially just made us feel welcome, like we
They're
were a
so happy
part,
to see us.
yes, of them. And it was just a wonderful experience. So, yes, the flight, of course, from here was like, so long, but I would
Yes,
do it
it was
again and
worth it.
again and again. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it was worth it.
And
So,
I remember when I got to Fiji, I was
mhm,
like, okay, Fiji is to Australians what Jamaica and Mexico is to Americans, because there was 100,000 of them there. And I knew immediately why they strongly embraced me because they're so unused to seeing us.
yes.
When I tell you, anywhere I went, I was in the front seat. They took really, really good care of me.
Mhm.
Everything from my driver from the airport. When I tell you the nicest people, and look,
Yes.
here's what I loved about them most is they love their country.
Oh, yeah.
They love their country. No electricity at all. They love their country and they are very passionate about it. It was just another reminder about if the world went to a hell in a handbasket, we would be the ones that wouldn't survive. Because when I tell you those people knew how to live off the land
Mhm.
and their whole relationship with family and how it was just all community and everybody just
Yes.
lived with each other.
Yes.
Good food too, though. So
Mhm. Mhm. And I love that they listen to their ancestors. So I was just really impressed. Like I said,
me too.
don't
We should go back.
well, yes, yes, I definitely want to. I definitely want to. So Juanita, let me ask you, what's the most ridiculous question someone has asked you about traveling solo?
So this I get this all the time, even to this day. Be careful. And if before I would just ignore it. Now I'd be like, you be careful. Like they robbing people on the train or you be careful. Now I give it back. And I'll never forget, I think where was I? I think I might have been in Egypt and the girls was going missing in the US.
Mhm.
And someone was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Are you okay?" It was in Atlanta. I think the girls was going missing. And they were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Because I'm good.
Mhm.
I never felt safer than I did when I was in Italy. I mean, not Italy, in Egypt, and I talk about that all the time. A lot of people have bad experiences in Egypt. It's not not my experience at all.
Right.
But when I found out the security that they have to take for Americans, and again, it depends on who you go with
Mhm.
and how you go. The amount of security that they have to provide for Americans, I did not feel nothing. They were not letting anything happen to me. If more than one of us was in a car, they had to have a security guard. So I felt very safe. So when people say be careful, or are you going to steal solo travel just because you have a partner? Why wouldn't I?
Right. Right.
Why wouldn't I? What was he doing before I met him? he was doing something that I'm not going to contribute in, and I'm gonna be okay with it. So there's a lot of insecurity, um, which is unfortunate because it drives the way people respond to things and the way that they're brought up, and that carries over into their relationships with people who don't have that trauma.
Right.
Um, so go ahead.
Okay. Now, if your suitcase could talk, what secrets would it spill about your solo travel adventures?
Does she take 10 pairs of shoes and wear one? I just told somebody, I was like, I don't even know why I bring all these. I did stop a long time ago. I stopped doing multiple purses, multiple, girl, please. I could care less about that. And I'm very much into how, look, my nail's not done right now, right? I care about a lot of other things, but it's some things I just don't. My feet can't hurt. So I'm not gonna wear the wrong shoes just so that it match my outfit and my feet hurt. And so yeah, my suitcase would be like, that girl packed all these clothes and she's going to be comfortable. I'll never forget when I went to Paris, it was this whole stereotype about, and Paris will tell you this too now, but oh, they dress like this and they wear heels. Please, not on those cobblestone roads, they do
Exactly.
not. They
Mhm.
are very much like that's Americans coming here trying to wear heels.
Yeah.
And so when I went to Venice and people tried to warn me, and I packed that big suitcase with a million pairs of shoes, a million purses, and different sunglasses, and 5 million outfits, that was the last time. And now I still, to some like people who only pack like carry-ons, they would probably still say I overpacked. I'm not going to put everything into a carry-on because you usually end up having to check it anyway.
Right.
But I am definitely not carrying a big suitcase 2 and 3 hours. So
Okay.
yeah, my suitcase will say that girl gonna put those same sandals on, flip flops.
I don't blame you. You have to be comfortable when you're traveling. You never know what adventure you may stumble upon. So,
Exactly.
all right. So, how do you balance the freedom of solo travel with the desire for companionship or connection on the road?
So that's an interesting. I never feel like I don't have a companion though. So even though you are solo traveling
Mhm.
and going home by yourself is not the end of the world. It's actually kind of nice. You're not hosting all the time. But I tell people all the time, when you travel with a group or with a companion, you typically only talk to your companion or your group. When I am traveling, I meet more people than I would ever have met when I'm with somebody because people are always curious about the Black girl sitting at the bar by herself or the Black girl sitting at the table by herself.
Right.
And so more people have come up and just sparked conversations with me because they want to get to know what is your story. And this was even in Canada, which I still consider that very much the US. What is your story that you are here by yourself? And so I've met some great people. And again, more and more of us are traveling, but it's still like you can pick us out the crowd, right?
Right.
And even when I was in Seychelles, there was one sister there. We buddied up, So I leave here by myself, but I'm rarely by myself when I
Right.
get there. And so, and I look forward to the people that I'm going to meet along the way. Um, I like people watching. Um, you learn so much about other things that you don't if you only see it in the US, you don't understand because it's different, right, for us. But you start to have an appreciation for other people's cultures and you understand that certain behaviors aren't personal, it's cultural. And
Right.
so when you understand that, you don't take that personal, right? Now, it's not to say you should accept any crap. Like some people are really bothered by they want to take a picture of you because you're Black.
Mm.
I don't like you sneaking to take a picture of me, but if you ask me for a picture, I will most likely say yes. So it's a lot of isms in travel, but yeah, I would probably end there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Juanita. And let me ask you, where can people follow you and follow your travels?
Nowhere. No, I'm just kidding. It's She Travels Solo, but if
Okay.
you put in NOIR Travel T,
Mhm.
that will bring me up as well. But it's She Travels Solo.
All right. So Noor Travel
T, all one
Tea.
word.
Okay. And she
It's
travels.
Black Travels Tea. It's the
Okay.
tea of Black travel, and that's
All
technically
right.
what it is.
Noor.
But she
Okay.
travels solo, will bring me up on TikTok and Instagram.
Most definitely. And if it's okay with you, I can include that in the comments as well.
Sure.
All right. Well, I just want to say again, your story is definitely an inspiration for others. I look forward to your upcoming trip and trips. So let me pluralize that because, you just have such an interesting life and what you do when you go on your trips. I know a lot of times there's a part that you're giving back, whether that's through donations
Yes.
or different things that you do to help the communities that you go into. So thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy lady, so I do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
And thanks for having me. And I'm glad you mentioned that part because it's huge. People see it as an inconvenience that Cuba has all of the requirements to visit there. But in addition to Cuba, it is something that I try to do in any impoverished community is that I will volunteer my time. That's one of my favorite, I probably should have said that is one of my real favorite travel stories was when I was in Thailand and I went to visit the schools, and the kids just absolutely loved having an American come and talk to them. And so I definitely try and give back, try, especially for the kids, more the kids, because then, they have no control over the lives they live at that time. But anywhere I can give back and volunteer and donate is something that I definitely do. I don't try to just take from their community when I'm visiting it.
And we appreciate that. All right. Well,
Thanks for
thank you.
having me.
Most definitely. Remember, self-love is sexy. Be selfish in your love for self and selfless in your love for others. If you enjoyed this video, like it. If you found it useful and want to see more, subscribe. If it pertains to someone you know, share it. And if you have an opinion, leave a comment. A conscious heart will do all four. Thank you.